All right, picture this. It's 8:55 in the morning. You've just sat down, coffee's still too hot to drink, and a message comes in from the IT admin. Essentially, the CEO signed in from Lagos, Nigeria at 3:12 this morning. But the problem is, the CEO was asleep in London at 3:12 this morning, and the company is 4 days away from closing its biggest deal in its history. That is a real morning in a SOC. That exact scenario where an executive account lighting up from a country it's never touched at an hour that makes no sense right when the stakes are at its highest. That is one of the most common security incidents a security operation teams essentially deal with. And by the end of this video, you'll have investigated it from end to end, not just read about it, right? Investigated it thoroughly with real logs, real queries, and a real incident report you can put in front of a manager. So a bit about me quickly, so you know why I'm the one walking you through this. I'm Salvesh. I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant at a Big Four firm, around 4 years in the field now, and over the time I've helped hundreds of beginners build real experience and land their first cyber roles. Not just kind of certifications on a shelf, right? This is actual defensible kind of I did this, I can walk you through every decision type experience. That's the whole point of this series. And I want to be straight with you about something, right? Because it's the reason this whole series exists. Home labs are fine. Spinning up kind of like a vulnerable VM and popping it, is great, but it brings no value to a company, and every hiring manager knows this, right? What gets you hired is engagement experience. Essentially, you were handed a business problem, you solved it and documented it, and you can defend it under questioning. That's what we're building today. One complete engagement. Basically a portfolio piece with a client, a brief, and a deliverable, and a full story that you can explain. Okay, let me say a bit more about why this distinction matters, because it's the single most common thing that beginners get wrong. When you write you built a home lab on a CV, the hiring manager reads that as you followed a tutorial. And when you write something instead like you've investigated a executive account takeover during a simulated client engagement, you then traced the initial access and delivered an instant report, they read this as the person who sat down as a real analyst and produced what a analyst produces, right? Same amount of effort on your side, but completely different signal on their end. And the trick is, it's not just doing harder work, right? Or working for longer hours. It's you have to do the work that's shaped like the real job. And the job in a SOC is when something suspicious happens, you investigate it with evidence, you contain it, and you write it up so a business can act. That's the shape we're going to be following today for the next hour or so. One more thing before we start, because I get asked this constantly, right? You don't need to be an expert to do this. You don't need years of experience or a stack of certifications. As long as you can follow instructions, copy a query, and read a table of results, you'll be able to do everything in this video. And I'll explain every line and step as we go. So even if you're brand new, you don't need to worry. So here's what's coming up. We're going to take that 3 a.m. alert and find out with evidence whether the CEO is actually compromised. We'll rebuild the entire attack timeline to the second. We'll find out how the attacker got in. We'll find the back doors they left behind, because a good attacker always leaves a way back in. And we'll find out whether the CEO is the only victim. And this little spoiler, executives are rarely the only victim. And then what we'll do is write the incident report that goes to the client, because in a real SOC, work that isn't documented essentially didn't happen. By the end, you'll have used KQL. Which is the query language behind Microsoft Sentinel. And this is one of the most in-demand SOC skills on the market right now. You'll also have mapped a live attack to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And this is the language every SOC team uses to describe what attackers do. You'll also have an interview answer so specific that it ends the do you have experience question that interviewers ask. And I want to set your expectations, honestly, because I hate videos that pretend this stuff is instant. This is going to be a proper investigation. It'll take you a couple of hours if you actually run every query and write the report. And it should, right? Because real analysts, they're not going to solve incidents in 90 seconds. So if you follow along properly and it takes you an afternoon, that's not you being slow. That's you doing the job at the pace the actual job is done. So what I want to kind of re-emphasize is just give it time. The people who kind of rush through this and skip the report, all they did is just watch a tutorial. And the people who actually take their time and finish the deliverable, they're going to get proper experience. And I want you guys to obviously be the second kind. So let's get into it. Okay, from this point onwards, I'm not your instructor, but instead I'll be your VCISO. And this stands for Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. Essentially means I'm the outsourced head of security for a company that isn't big enough to have their own. And that's a real job, by the way. And it's a job a lot of you watching might end up doing in the future. Because most companies in the world are pretty small or they're medium sized and they can't afford a full-time security chief. Okay, so the company is Cloudora. They make HR software. This is the system other companies use to run payroll, store employee records, manage onboarding, and it's business to business, right? And the company has around 150 people headquartered in London. And I want you to hold on to what kind of company this is because it matters for the whole investigation. Cloudora holds sensitive data for a lot of other businesses. So if Cloudora gets breached, it's not just Cloudora's problem, it's every client's problem too. And that's what makes them a target. And here's your ticket, CLD 0001. And it's a suspicious sign-in activity on this email right here, daniel.reeve@cloudora.io. So that's for Daniel Reeve, who is the CEO. And this is a priority P1. So in most SOCs, P1 is top of the scale. So you drop what you're doing and work on this as soon as possible. And it's P1 for two reasons. One is it's an executive account, which means access to everything and authority. It has access to everything and authority over everyone. Number two is Cloudora is days from closing its biggest ever enterprise deal. So right now, if the CEO's mailbox is in someone else's hands, that deal and the company's reputation is exposed, and yeah, it's detrimental, right? So you've been given two files. The first is 8 days of Entra ID sign-in logs. So Entra ID is Microsoft's identity platform, and it used to be called Azure Active Directory. So you'll probably still hear both the names, and they're the same thing. And every time anyone at Cloudora signs into anything Microsoft, so email, Teams, SharePoint, it generates a sign-in record. So who, when, from what IP, from what city, on what device, and crucially, whether it succeeded or failed. So that's that file. The second file is the audit log. So that's not just sign-ins, right? That's more of like the changes. So this is, for example, someone registers a new device, someone creates a mailbox, someone resets a password. So sign-ins are essentially who knocked on the door, and audit is what they did once they were inside. So you're going to need both of these. And usually on some of these projects, most beginners only look at the sign-ins, but we'll cover both of those. And your job is going to be in 5 parts. You'll first confirm or refute the compromise. So essentially, is this real or is the CEO just on holiday? Then you'll build the full timeline, find any persistence, the actor left behind, check whether anyone else got hit, and write the report I'm going to take and give to the client. That's the whole engagement. And I want to frame the stakes the way a real client would frame them to you, because it changes how you work, right? Cloudora's CEO isn't just asking, is my email okay? He's asking, is the deal safe? Is my company's name safe? And are we about to be the reason our customers get defrauded? So when you're investigating, you're not chasing a technical curiosity, right? You're answering a business question with money and reputation attached to it. That's why we document as we go, and that's why we're careful before we accuse. And that's essentially why the report at the end matters as well, because even if you go through the investigation, you need to kind of document what you've done. So when you do this project, keep the business question in your head the whole way through. Is Cloudora safe, and can we prove it? So yeah, let's get into this and set up the lab. Okay, so here we have the lab setup section. And I'm going to keep this dead simple. We're loading our data into Azure Data Explorer. And before anyone asks, why not the big fancy Sentinel? Here's the honest answer, and it's actually worth understanding. So there's the concept I want you guys to understand is SIM versus our lab. In a real SOC, you live in a SIM, which is a security information and event management. That's what it stands for. And Microsoft's is called Sentinel. A SIM swallows logs from across the whole business, stores them, and lets you hunt through them for attacks. But here's the thing, in a real job, those logs are already flowing into Sentinel automatically through connectors. And you almost never hand load kind of a raw file into Sentinel. And that's what Sentinel genuinely makes it painful to do manually. So for the purpose of this hands-on lab, we just need our two CSVs, somewhere we can query them with KQL. And Azure Data Explorer does exactly that. It takes the file directly and speaks the identical language, which is KQL. And everything you learn here transfers to Sentinel one-to-one because it's in the same language and you get the same skills without kind of fighting the tool and finding a workaround, which is you're never going to use, right? So we just want to build the skills that we'll actually use on a day-to-day basis. Okay, step one is to get a free cluster. So what we want to do is, let me create a new tab and type in dataexplorer.azure.com right there. If you have a Microsoft account, you can sign in or create an account. And then what you can do is create a cluster. You'll get given a free cluster. So it costs nothing and you don't need a Azure subscription as well, which is good for you guys. And then, yeah, create the name, display name. You can call it something like Cloudora, database name and cluster location. You can keep the same, put whichever location is nearer to you for the location, but I'm going to keep it as Europe, and then click sign in and create cluster. And it should take a second to just load up. But yeah, I've already created one, so mine just popped up right now. But yeah, make sure to create yours and you should come to this screen right here. And essentially the cluster is the engine and the database is where our tables live. So yeah, make sure you guys have that already. And one thing before we load our CSV files in, if you want to follow along with the same data I'm using, the guide, so this guide right here, as well as all the files you need. So let me just show you which files I'm talking about. So these files right here, and if you go into resources, you'll have the CSV files as well. So they're all linked down below. So make sure to grab that right now before we carry on. But yeah, if you want to use your own logs as well, feel free to do so. It's totally up to you. But yeah, either way, what we're going to do is get the data into Data Explorer right here. Okay, step 2 is to load the data. So what we'll do is on this page right here, we'll click ingest data, click local file, new table right here, click on my database and then new table, and then name it Cloudora sign in, and then underscore CL. So make sure you have underscore CL. Type it exactly as it's spelled right here. Let me just make sure this is capital. Sorry, I'm using the wrong. Perfect. So Cloudora sign in, capital I, capital S, and then underscore CL, capital CL. And I'll explain that kind of suffix in a second, but type it exactly like that. And so every query we kind of write later is just going to work based off this, and just click tick, and then we will paste in our, drag and drop our file right here, our sign in logs.csv. So just drag that in and that will load up. And let me just go back into full screen. So what Data Explorer is going to do is when we click next, it will essentially read it, kind of preview the columns and work out the data types based off the input we have. And now two kind of quick checks we need to do in this preview. And the second one is going to be really important as well. So firstly, what we want to do is make sure the time generated comes through as a date time and not a text. So as you can see right here, time generated, because our whole kind of investigation runs on these event times. So as you can see right here, this is all good. And the second one is, this will kind of trip you up later down the line if we get this wrong, is the result type. So let me just go down right here. So as you can see right here, let me just make sure everything has come through. So yeah, this is the result type, and this is the one that the sign-in result codes come in, and it's set to a type to string as normal. So as you can see right here, result type is string, and if it isn't, and sometimes Data Explorer will guess it's a number because it's all digits, right? So right now we should all be good because ours is a string, and yeah, this time generated is date and time. So we can move on and then just click finish. And we'll wait for that to load. And what we're going to do after it is do the same thing for the other CSV file. So just get that uploaded right here. So I'll just wait for this to load and we'll add the next one in a second. Okay, that's been loaded. So we'll do the same thing, create the other table. I'll click close right here and click ingest. Local file, new table, and then name this Cloudora audit underscore CL. Click enter, and then we'll do the same. Drag and drop that in there, click next. Let's just make sure everything has loaded. Time generated is fine. And yeah, result is string as well. Everything is all good, so we can just click finish and wait for this to load now. And in terms of the CL suffix I mentioned earlier, basically it kind of looks random, right? Why are we writing CL at the random? But it stands for custom log. It's the tag that Microsoft Sentinel automatically adds to any table when you bring it in yourself. And we don't strictly need it in Data Explorer, but we're keeping the same name on purpose, right? So that's what, when you take these skills into Sentinel and when you use my query pack, every query matches perfectly with 0 edits, and you won't have any confusion later down the line. Okay, amazing. That has loaded as well, so I'll just close that. And one concept I want to explain to you guys before we move on is KQL. So KQL stands for Custo Query Language, right? If you ever seen SQL, it's kind of like a cousin. And honestly, it's easier to read, and it looks more complicated than it actually is, because it flows in the order you think that we actually write it in. So you start with your data, you push it through steps, left to right, and there's no kind of memorizing a rigid sentence structure, right? You'll have the core of it within 3 or 4 queries today, and that same language runs in Microsoft Sentinel, Defender, Log Analytics, and Azure Data Explorer. So if you learn it once here, you can use it across the entire Microsoft security stack, and it's one of the highest leverage things you can learn as a new SOC analyst. Okay, before we investigate the data, we need to make sure that the data is really there, right? So in the query window right here on the left, if you open that up, what we want to run is this command right here, Cloudora sign in, and we can do count right here, and then click run. So Cloudora sign in underscore CL and then count. So click run, and you should get the number at the bottom. You should see about 1,479 rows. If you see 0 or the table isn't listed on the left, that means the upload didn't finish or the names are off. So fix that before anything else. And because every single query is gonna kind of depend on the data actually being there, you need to make sure you do this. And one thing to note, unlike Sentinel's logs pages, Data Explorer has no global time range picker at the top where the data lives inside the queries themselves, which you'll see the moment we write our first one. But yeah, and I want you guys to kind of get in the habit of running a count like this every time you load new data or on any future kind of tasks you do, because it takes 2 seconds and it saves you from the most embarrassing mistake that you can do in a SOC, which is spending an hour hunting through data that never loaded properly and essentially just concluding that there was nothing here, when the truth is your query was running against an empty table. So make sure, you run this command when you get started. And a 0 row kind of result almost never means no attack. It means check your data and your time range first, verify the data is really there, then start investigating. That one reflex will save you wasted afternoons and any kind of advanced technique I teach you, it can essentially be wasted because you didn't load the data properly. Okay, amazing. Now that you understand that, when we move on now, I want you to follow along, run every query with me, and by the end of this, you'll be able to basically say, I investigated an executive account takeover, I traced it back to the initial access, found the persistence, scoped a second victim, and wrote the report. That sentence is essentially what we're going to be doing in the next few steps. Okay, step 1 is to check if the Lagos sign-in is real. And we're going to get a quick win because I want you to kind of feel how fast the truth falls out of good data. And the whole alert is the CEO sign-in from Lagos, right? So let's just look at the CEO's day. Kind of every single sign-in Daniel made on the incident day in order. So what you want to do is type in this command right here. Cloudora, let me type it in, Cloudora sign in CL, and then we want to type where user principal name equals Daniel dot rev at cloudora.io, where time generated between date, time, let's say 2026 08-10, and date time 2026-08-11, so between those dates. And then we'll do project time generated, app display name, we want their IP address, city, country, result type, as well as result description. Amazing. And then we want to order by time generated ASC. So I hope you can kind of understand how easier it is to understand this kind of KQL query right here. But what we can do is just click run. Let me kind of copy and paste the command because I feel like I might have typed in something incorrectly. Okay, there you go. There had to be some sort of small spelling mistake, but if you kind of just make sure you spell everything right, and copy this, what you see on screen right now. And before we get into this, I'll explain to you what we've written right here, just so you kind of understand what's going on and you have an understanding of the anatomy of a KQL query. So KQL reads top to bottom, and the pipe character, so that vertical bar, is the whole kind of trick. You start with a table, and then each pipe passes the data to the next step, which filters it or shapes it or sorts it. It's kind of like a conveyor belt. The table goes in one end and comes out the other end as your answer. Okay, so the first line we have Cloudora sign-in underscore CL. That's the raw material, all 1400 sign-ins. Second line we have where user principal name equals Daniel.Reeve. That keeps only Daniel's rows and throws everyone else away. The double equal means an exact match. The third line is where time generated between. So this is the 10th and the 11th. That's the incident day only, and from midnight to midnight in UTC. Fourth line is project. That kind of trips people up. It doesn't mean project like a slideshow. It means pick these columns, and I'm going to be choosing the 6 columns that tells a story and hide the rest so it's readable. And then the last line, order by time generated ascending. So that's oldest first. So it reads like a story from top to bottom. Okay, let's just read the table right now. If we go from top to bottom, if we look at the first row, 12:30, midnight, there's a failed login, as you can see right here. That's the attacker taking an early swing at the CEO and missing. Then it goes quiet for a couple of hours and they come back at 3:09. Another failure, same Lagos IP, and then we have 3:10, another failure, and 3:12 right here. And essentially 0 means success, right? So the attacker got in at 3:12 in the morning. 3:14, they open Outlook Web, that's the mailbox. 3:26, they open the Azure portal, and then look at 8:41 right there. That's in the same morning. This is when Daniel signs in from London on his Mac like a normal human being before starting his day. Okay, so I want to explain to you a concept right here. So we have one account, 2 different cities, Lagos at 3:12 and then London at 8:41. That's 5.5 hours apart, and Lagos to London is around about a 6.5 hour flight minimum. So he did not fly, and this is what analysts call impossible travel. The same identity appearing in 2 places faster than a human body can move between them. It's one of the strongest single signals of account takeover there is, and most SIMs have a built-in rule that looks exactly for this. And I want you guys to notice the kind of minute detail right here. So essentially the failure comes first, right? There was an early miss at 12:35, then at 3:09 there was another failure, 3:10 fail, and then 3:12 success. That ordering is the kind of fingerprint of someone guessing until they get it right. When it's really you don't usually fail twice at 3 a.m. and then succeed from a Windows machine you've never used before, right? You just log in. So read the logs like a story, and the order of events tells you as much as the events themselves. A success on its own is nothing, right? A success with 2 failures stacked right in front of it at 3 a.m. from a new country is essentially an attacker finding the door. So what I want to also go through is I want to build the discipline right from the beginning, right? For you guys, this is a good habit to get into. A strong signal is not a verdict. Before I write compromised in a report that goes to a client, I have to rule out the boring explanations. Could this be a VPN making him look like he's in Lagos? Could it be a mobile carrier routing weirdly? Could he be genuinely be traveling? A junior analyst calls it right here and is right maybe 80% of the time, but a good analyst spends the next 2 minutes making sure. So that's exactly what we're going to do in the next step. Okay, so to know if something is abnormal, you have to know what normal looks like, right? So we have to baseline the account. So where has Daniel signed in from across the entire 8 days of the data? So what we want to do is type in this command right here. So let's get rid of this. Type in this command and I'll explain to you what this means when it runs. There you go. So we have a new keyword here, which is summarize. So if we start with where, this filters the rows, then summarize collapses them into groups and kind of does the maths on each group. And if you read the last part first, so if we go to by country, city and IP address, that says give me one row for each unique combination of country, city and IP. Then the front part says what to calculate for each of those groups. So count of sign-ins, so the earliest one, the latest one. So instead of 40 individual London logins, I get a single line that says London, this IP, 39 sign-ins from this data to this data. And it turns a wall of rows into a summary you can read in one glance. Summarize is kind of like the single most useful verb in KQL. You'll probably use it in almost every hunt you ever do. Okay, if we look at the shape of it within the table, we have London, dozens of sign-ins across all 8 days, right? And then we have Lagos appearing only in the small hours, only in the last few days, with failures stacked in front of the successes. And that's not a travel pattern, right? When someone actually travels, the history shows it. The new location shows up during the day, it succeeds cleanly, it sticks around. Daniel's Lagos activity is at 3 a.m. kind of burst, preceded by failed guesses, which is a different thing entirely. Now, here's where I teach you the skill that, in my kind of opinion, separates a real analyst from an alert forwarding bot, because there's a second account in this data set that also shows a brand new country this week. His name is Omar Farah, right? And he's showing up from Dubai. So if we run the same baseline on him, I'll just paste that through and we can check his account. So if we paste that, so we've changed it to Omar right here. Sorry, let me make sure I have got the right command. Okay, there you go. Okay, a quick concept to understand is anomaly versus explained anomaly, right? So 2 accounts, 2 new countries in the same week. If location alone were the verdict, you'd flag them both and you'd be wrong about one, right? But the difference is Omar's sign-ins are during the day, as you can see right here, and they succeed on the first try. There's no failures in front of them, and they're usually on the same IP, same kind of usual device he uses across those days. But essentially what that means is that man is probably on a business trip, kind of checking his email in the evening. That's essentially just normal travel. And you'll probably see the few Lagos rows on Omar as well. So those are attempts from each of those attacker IPs. That's the same password spray taking a swing at him, and they also failed as well. And this baseline view doesn't show the result column, but they are all failures and none of them got in. So Omar's a target who held kind of sprayed and it didn't get breached. But yeah, listing every account in that tried but didn't crack bucket is part of your homework that you'll be set later. So we'll just leave that for now. But what matters right here is the Dubai rows and what they tell us. If you kind of bring in your Daniel's result as well, we'll compare them both. So you have the same anomaly on the surface, which is a new country, but they're completely different underneath. Daniel's was 3 a.m. and there were failures first. and it was a device never seen on his account before. One burst and then gone. Omar it's daytime, it's a clean first try success, it's his phone, and it's spread naturally across days. One of these is a takeover, the other is a false positive, and telling them apart, kind of like an anomaly versus explained anomaly, is the core judgment of this entire job. It's also honestly the thing AI-based triage still gets wrong, because the machine sees new country and panics on both. You look at the evidence, but when you're kind of analyzing this, right, an AI might not understand and it would just kind of give you a false positive. So I want you guys to remember Omar, because he comes back in the homework later on, and being able to clear him with evidence is worth as much in an interview as much as kind of catching Daniel. Okay, one more habit to build from this step, and it's more of a mindset one. Notice that I didn't just look for evidence that Daniel was hacked. I actively went looking for the innocent explanation and tried to make it fit. That's deliberate. It's called considering the alternative hypothesis, and it's what keeps you honest. If you only hunt for confirmation, you'll find it every time, because at 3 a.m. everything looks scary. The discipline is to ask what would have to be true for this to even be benign, and then you would check whether it is. So for Daniel, benign would mean a travel pattern, a known device, daytime activity, and none of it held here. For Omar, benign held on every axis. So you had the same question, two different answers, both defensible. That's what a written verdict actually is. Not a gut feeling, but a hypothesis you kind of tested, and the evidence that kind of settled it. So we have the verdict on step 2. Daniel is compromised. We've ruled out travel, VPN, and carrier quirks, and we've got a clean false positive next to him to prove we know the difference. Now the question that every good investigation asks next is, how did they get in? So we'll go over that now. Okay, so a successful login from an attacker means they had the password. So the question is, how did they get Daniel's password? And you don't just guess, right? You hunt backwards through the data for the attack that came first. So what you can do is, credential attacks, they leave a very specific fingerprint, so failures, and there's usually lots of them. So let's look at every failed login in the whole data set and see who's generating them. And I want you guys to understand a concept before we move on, which is around result codes. In these logs, the result type is a number, and 0 means it's a success. And 50126, remember that number, you'll see it probably for the rest of your career. And 50126 means invalid username or password. So a failed credential attempt. And a wall of 50216s from one place is a sound of someone trying different passwords. So what we want to do is search for this. So I'll give you guys the command to type, and then I'll explain to you what it means. So let's get rid of this one right here and type in this query right here. So if we look at this right here, we have 3 Lagos IPs noted here. And if you look at the targeted accounts column, it's not one account hammered 1,000 times, right? It's a handful of failures spread across 20 plus different accounts each, as you can see right here. This one's 18, and one IP touched 23 different people right here, and another 20 and another 18. Okay, firstly we need to understand a concept, which is password spray versus a brute force attack. This is kind of the difference between two attacks that beginners constantly mix up, right? Brute force is one account and thousands of password attempts. It's a big kind of attack, right? And it trips account lockouts almost immediately. Whereas As password spray is kind of like the opposite, and it's a much smarter way to go about this. The attacker takes one common password, think something like autumn 2026 with an exclamation mark, and it tries it against hundreds of accounts just once or twice, because no single account sees more than a couple of failures, right? Nobody gets locked out and no simple alarms fire. It essentially just flies under the radar. That's what this is. It's a password spray attack. And in the MITRE attack framework, which is kind of like the shared vocabulary every SOC uses to name attack behaviors, this technique is T1110.003, and it's password spraying. Make sure you write that specific ID down. I'll put it on the screen right here. T1110.003. Sorry, I didn't completely type the wrong number. 1110.003. That's the technique ID. And let me just explain MITRE a bit more in depth before we move on. So imagine kind of like a giant table. Across the top are the attacker's goals in order. For example, get credentials, get in, stay in, avoid detection, and so on, right? Those are called tactics, the why. Underneath each goal is a list of specific methods attackers actually use to achieve it. These are called techniques, the how, and each one of those IDs, just like T1110.003 right here, which is password spraying. So when I say all these different techniques, for example, the password spraying under the credential access tactic, I'm saying the attacker's goal was to get credentials, and then the specific method was spraying. The reason the whole industry uses these codes, is that it turns a vague sentence like they kind of guessed passwords into a precise shared label that any analyst anywhere instantly understands. It's the difference between kind of describing a symptom and naming the diagnosis. Every finding in your report should carry its MITRE ID for exactly this reason. And here's the kind of tell you should carry forward. The signature of a spray is never the number of failures on one account, right? That's brute force. Instead, it's the spread. One source hitting many different accounts as a small number of times each time is basically the tell. Volume across accounts, not kind of like volume against an account, essentially. So I want you guys to kind of lock in that pattern, because you're about to kind of build a detection rule afterwards in a task I set you. So let's confirm the timeline of the spray, so we know how long this attack happened. So I'm gonna type in the command to get that. So let's click run. Okay, amazing. So we have a new kind of command right here. We have bin. So this kind of rounds timestamps into buckets, right? So for example, bin of time generated right here. And then you can put something like 1 day. So this groups everything into daily boxes. It's how you turn kind of like a pile of timestamps into how much happened each day. You'll use bin constantly for spotting trends over time. Okay, this essentially shows you the story of patience. The spray ran 3 nights straight, right? So you have the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. Nothing but failures, and then on the 3rd night, the success happened, right? This attacker wasn't lucky in one shot. They were grounding away quietly for 3 nights until a password finally worked. Which, by the way, is exactly why this should have been caught on night 1. So now that we know, we have the initial access was a password spray, not phishing, not malware. So in MITRE terms, the attacker now has a T1078, which is valid accounts. They're logged in as a legitimate user, which is terrifyingly quiet because from the system's point of view, it just seems like it's Daniel. So the next question is, what did they do once they were in? All right, so this is a step a lot of beginners skip, and it's a step that turns a password problem into a real incident. We're going to be switching files now. So off the sign-in log and onto the audit log, the other log file I showed you earlier. And I want you to remember that the sign-ins are who came in, and then the audit is what they changed. So let's see everything the attacker did from those Lagos IPs. So what you want to do is type in this command right here. Now I'll explain to you a few concepts you need to understand before we move on. Click run. Amazing. So put yourself in the attacker's shoes for a second. You've got the CEO's password, but you know that sooner or later someone might notice and reset it, right? The moment they do, you're locked out, and all that patient spraying is for nothing. So a competent attacker's very first move after getting in is to make sure they can get back in even after a password reset. And that's called persistence. And there are two classic ways to do it on a Microsoft account, and this attacker essentially used both, which I'll go over in a second. Another concept is we just made the switch, right, from sign-ins to audit. So we have two different tables. The sign-in log answered who logged in, from where, and did it work. But logging in doesn't tell you what someone changed once they're inside. That's the audit log's job. It records administrative actions. For example, registering a device, creating a rule, resetting a password, adding someone to a group. And if the sign-in log is the CCTV kind of analogy, if we use that right now at the front door, the audit log is the CCTV inside the building. And an attacker's login is visible in one. The damage they do is visible in the inside CCTV. So I just want you guys to kind of conceptually understand that. And if we miss the audit log, you'll consistently be under scope of incidents. You won't understand what's actually going on. You'll just see the break-in and never notice what they did inside, essentially. Okay, as you can see, there are two events, both within 20 minutes of getting in. If we look at the first one, we have 3:18, 6 minutes after they logged in. User registered security info. They registered their own authenticator app, and then device name Pixel 6. Daniel doesn't own a Pixel 6, right? So yeah, this is a big one. They added their own phone as multi-factor authentication device on Daniel's account. And think about what this means, right? Now, even if IT resets Daniel's password tomorrow, the attacker's phone is still used as a trusted second factor. They can walk right back in. This is why, and I really need you guys to absorb this, right? Just reset the password is not the fix. If you reset the password and walk away, the account is still owned. In MITRE, this is T1098.005, which is device registration for persistence. And removing that attacker MFA method is going to be a non-negotiable when we get to containment. Okay, now the second event, which is 3:31. New inbox rule created. The rule is called RSS subscriptions, right here. And it deliberately looks kind of boring, so nobody really looks twice into this. And read what it does. Any email from finance or any email containing the word invoice gets moved to the RSS feeds folder and marked as read. Sit with how nasty this sounds. The attacker is now inside the CEO's mailbox, and they've set it up so that any finance or invoice email gets hidden from the CEO before he even sees it. Why? So they can run invoice fraud. The attacker's emails as a client, as the CEO was saying, right, are, for example, our bank details have changed, please pay the new account. The client then replies to check, and that reply, because it mentions the invoice, gets silently filed away where Daniel never sees it. The fraud runs, and then the real CEO is blind to it. This attack pattern is called business email compromise, BEC, and it's one of the single most expensive categories of cybercrime on the planet. Billions a year, pretty much. In MITRE, it's T1564.008, email hiding rules. And now you see why this was a P1, right? With a big deal about to close. The attacker built the machinery for exactly the kind of fraud that could blow up that real deal. And I want you to notice why the rule is named RSS subscriptions. Nobody uses RSS anymore, and that's the point. The attacker picked a name so dull and so plausible that if Daniel ever glanced at his mailbox rules, I would slide right over it. That's a defensible evasion move on top of a fraud setup. Hiding in the boring. When you're hunting, the boringly named thing that shouldn't exist is often exactly the thing that you need to look at. Train yourself to be suspicious of these different names. For example, RSS subscriptions, or an untitled rule, or something like test. Attackers love camouflage, right? That reads as cluster. And here's a mindset shift I want you guys to make from this step, because it's bigger than this one incident. A junior analyst sees the successful login and thinks the password is leaked, let's reset it, and it's done. A real analyst sees a successful login and immediately asks, okay, so what did they do in the 20 minutes they had, right? And the login is the beginning of the incident, not the end of it. The damage lives inside the audit log, which is right here. We have the persistence, the rules, the changes. So if you stopped at step 3 and you just reset a password and left 2 live backdoors in place, and you'd have found out you were wrong when the invoice fraud hit, it's going to be very damaging, right? So always ask what they did after they got in. So that's persistence. They have 2 backdoors, one to keep access, one to run the fraud quietly. This is no longer the CEO's password leaked, right? This is a staged BC operation, which raises the obvious scary question: if they went through, is Daniel really the only one? Okay, moving on to the next step, what we're going to do is scope. And essentially what this means is we're going to check if anyone else is compromised. So we can't assume one victim, right? This is a rule you internalize early or you learn it the hard way. And the attacker sprayed 26 accounts. They only need a couple to work. So let's ask the data directly. Which accounts did the attacker infrastructure actually get into? Not just kind of attempt, right? But actually succeed. So that's the attacker's IP plus result type 0. And then we need to find which ones succeeded. So let me give you the command for that. Okay, it should be this one right here, and I'll explain to you what we've done. Okay, amazing. We've got the output. So this is the scoping, right? We have 2 filters combined with and right here. So we have the IP. So the IP has to be the attacker infrastructure, and then we have the result to be success, which is 0. And then we have summarized by with kind of no maths in front of it this time, which is a kind of way of saying, give me the distinct combinations. And it's a quick way to list all the successful sessions that happened. This one query is kind of the difference between closing the ticket thinking you caught it all and closing it while a second attacker session is still happening live. So scoping is not an optional step. You have to do this. And if we look right here, it's not just one name. We have 2. We have Daniel Reeve, as we know, and we have Priya right there. So we have a second account. Priya was successfully accessed from Lagos IP at 3:47 that same morning, so 30 minutes after the CEO. And the attacker worked on both accounts in the same session window. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make a deliberate teaching choice where I'm not going to investigate Priya for you on camera, because the single most valuable thing you can do right now is investigate her yourself using the exact same 3 moves I just showed you on Daniel. So build her timeline, baseline her account, check the audit log for persistence, and that's your task. And it's the whole reason this project turns into experience instead of a lecture, right? I'll tell you how to find her. You go find out her story. Everything you need is in kind of like the query pack I give you. And And for the report right now, what matters is the finding. So the scope is 2 confirmed compromised accounts, not 1, right? You have Daniel and Priya. So write that down. And there are 24 more accounts that got sprayed but held. We'll deal with those in the recommendations because they need forced resets even though they weren't breached. Okay, so this is a good moment to kind of give you a mental model you'll reuse on every incident. There are 3 tiers of affected, and a good report keeps them separate. So tier 1, we have confirmed compromised. The attacker succeeded and got in, essentially. That's Daniel and Priya in our case. Tier 2 is targeted but not breached. The attacker tried and failed. That's the 24 near misses we had from our case as well. And then we have tier 3, which is investigated and cleared. So they could have looked suspicious, but it turned out benign. That's Omar with our case, with his Dubai trip. So every account touched by this incident lands in exactly one of those 3 buckets. And your scope section should say which one is which. And why does this matter? Because each tier gets a different action. So confirmed accounts get full containment, targeted accounts get precautionary resets, and cleared accounts get a note explaining why you cleared them so nobody reinvestigates them next week. And if some analysts, they just lump everyone into affected, right? And either overreact or miss someone. And I want you guys to be more precise with this and actually sort them properly. So you have this skill set and you can talk about it in your interviews as well. Okay, so now we know what happened. We need to stop it. So that's the next section. Okay, we're moving on to contain, remediate, and verify. So in this data set, we're investigating after the fact. So we can't really click the buttons, right? But I'm going to walk you through exactly what containment looks like in a real tenant and in the exact order you do it, because the order is not arbitrary and interviewers love to kind of test whether you know why, right? So I'll explain that all to you in this section. So a concept I want you to understand is the containment sequence. So step 1, you're going to revoke the sessions before you even touch the password reset, right? You'll kill every active session and refresh token on both accounts. And the order matters, and I'll explain to you why. If you reset the password first, but don't revoke the sessions, the attacker's already open sessions keep working. They're still logged in. So revoking sessions is what actually boots them out right away. Step 2 is to reset the credentials. So new passwords on both accounts, but yeah, you already know why, right? A password reset alone doesn't clean this account because of the backdoor that they left open. So step 3, you're going to remove the attacker's MFA method. This is the one kind of beginners forget, and it's the one that matters most at the end of the day. And if you remember, that Pixel 6 authenticator has to come off of Daniel's account. If you skip this, you've done all this work and the attacker still strolls back in tomorrow. And yeah, remove the MFA before even thinking about calling the account clean. Step 4 is to delete the inbox rule. So kill the RSS subscriptions rule. So finance and invoice emails reach Daniel again. And you also want to audit both mailboxes for any other rules the attacker left. Step 5 is to block the attacker's IP. So those 3 Lagos addresses go into a conditional access as blocked locations. So that infrastructure can't reach the tenant at all. And step 6, this is the one people treat as optional and shouldn't. You need to verify. You rerun your step 1 to 5 queries and you confirm there is no attacker activity after your containment. So containment is a claim, right? Until you've proven it in the logs. And an analyst who kind of says, I've contained it, and an analyst who says, I contained it and here's a query proving no further activity, are 2 different levels of hires, and I obviously want you to be the second. And there's a framework worth knowing that sits underneath all of this, and naming it in an interview makes you sound more prominent. So the industry standard incident response lifecycle is the NIST model. So it runs like this: preparation, detection, and analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. Map what we did essentially onto that framework. So if I go through it, detection and analysis was steps 1 through 5. Everything we investigated essentially. And then containment is revoking sessions and blocking IPs, basically stopping the spread. Eradication is removing the MFA device and the inbox rule, so getting the attacker's footholds out. Recovery is bringing the account safely back into normal use with new credentials. And then the post-incident activities, the report and lessons learned. And you didn't just look at some logs, right? You executed a recognized IR lifecycle. And I want you to say it in that way and explain it when you're actually talking to an interviewer, for example. So the golden order for the hands-on part, and I want you to try memorize this, right? What you're going to do is revoke sessions, reset credentials, remove MFA, delete rules, block IPs, and verify. Revoke before reset, remove MFA before you call it clean. And if you get that right in an interview, you're going to sound like you've done a proper investigation. That's the whole deliverable. But yeah, now what we're going to do is move on to the report so we can showcase exactly what we've done. Okay, I've just pulled up the report template, and on the right, I've got a kind of example report I've written as well. So you can kind of compare and see what your answers are like. So these are both also in the link in the description, so you can fill this out. Just make sure you fill out the report template specifically. So yeah, here's a thing that nobody kind of tells beginners, right? The report is going to be the most important thing. It's essentially the job, right? In a real SOC, the investigation you just did is worth nothing to a business until it's written down in a way a client can act on. So what I want you to kind of take away from this is work that isn't documented essentially didn't happen. So this last step is not admin, it's the full deliverable. And it's the thing that you're going to be showing to hiring managers at the end of the day. So we're just going to be filling this blank template out, get it downloaded, and I'll just walk you through the different sections we have. So we have the executive summary. So here you would want to write 4 sentences a non-technical person can understand. Then you have the timeline, so everything we found in UTC. We have the findings, so the facts we established. We have indicators of compromise right here. So this is the IPs, the device name, the rule name, so another analyst can hunt for the same attacker. And then we have the MITRE mappings. So these are the the technique IDs I mentioned earlier, for example, T1110.003. And then we have the scope. So our 2 victims and the 24 near misses that happened. We also have the actions taken, so the containment sequence I just explained. We have the recommendations, so how to stop this next time, as well as the lessons learned, so what the response got right and wrong. And on the right, we have the example, and I'll explain to you how I want you to use it without kind of cheating yourself, right? Because if you use it the wrong way and you just copy it, there's no use, right? You learn nothing and you can't really defend it in an interview. I want you to use it as a checklist. So after you've written your own, did I catch the same findings essentially? And you also want to check, for example, certain things that you don't understand, you can just compare. So maybe you didn't have is my, for example, UTC timeline exactly the same? Have I made sure I've marked all those down? So just compare and kind of mark it yourself. And that gap is where you're going to learn what you did right and what you did wrong. And you can improve the next time you do this kind of project. And it's going to be a very important skill you develop, right? You'll be able to see how you perform in these situations and in these job roles. It's going to be a practice for you. And I want you to understand this concept when you're writing these reports, right? You want to write it like 2 audiences are reading. Here's the thing that makes this hard because it needs to be valuable to completely different people, and they're going to be reading essentially the same report. At the top, you have the executives and the client. They read the executive summary and maybe the recommendations, and they need this in plain English, right? So business impact and what do we do now? And at the bottom, you have technical people, the next analyst, the IT team, and auditor. They read the timeline, timestamps, the IOCs, the MITRE mapping, and they need precision. They need evidence they can act on. So a good report serves both without making either feel kind of talked down to. That's why this structure goes broad to deep. Summary first for the executive, technical detail for kind of like the engineer. And if you can write a document that a CEO and a SOC analyst both find useful, you have a skill that will flow into every senior role in this field because it never stops mattering, right? And one small discipline that I want you to carry out, and it's very important, is everything needs to be in UTC, as you can see right here. Time zones are where investigations kind of mess up, right? Your logs have to be in UTC. The attacker was in one zone, the victim was in another, and you might be in a third, for example. So if your report kind of mixes them, your timeline becomes kind of confusing and nobody can trust it. So pick UTC, state that you're using UTC, and keep every single timestamp in that. And it's a tiny habit that kind of you need to develop. And I want to make sure you fill out every section of this blank template, even the ones that feel obvious. If a section generally doesn't apply, what you can do is write one line saying why rather than leaving it empty. And an empty section reads as, oh, you forgot, or non-applicable, because essentially at the end of the day, you want to have a reason for why it's empty, right? You need to be able to explain it to someone, or a CEO, or for example, another SOC analyst. That's the difference between professional work and kind of just building out these reports for the sake of it. Amazing. That is the end of the engagement, and I'm glad you made it this far. Take a deep breath and I'll kind of walk you through what we've done today in a quick summary. So you took a 3 a.m. alert and you confirmed a real executive account takeover with evidence. You ruled out the innocent explanation, and you did it properly by baselining the account and comparing it against a genuine false positive. You traced the initial access back to a 3-night password spray. You found not one but two persistence mechanisms. So it was the attacker's MFA device and a BEC inbox rule that's staged for invoice fraud. And what you did after is you scoped the incident and found a second victim. You laid out the containment sequence in the right order, and you wrote, you're about to write an incident report that goes to the client. And this is the complete engagement. This is not just a home lab, right? This is the real work that you're going to be doing. Okay, now we'll kind of go over what you're going to say in an interview, which is going to be really useful for you guys, right? And I want you to kind of memorize this, and the more you say it, the more naturally it'll come. So what you're going to say is, I investigated an executive account takeover end to end. I traced the password spray to the initial access. I found MFA persistence and a BEC inbox rule that the attacker had. You staged it, and I scoped a second compromised account, and I wrote the incident report. And I can walk you through every decision I made, and if the interview asks another question, you can just walk them through in detail. And I want you to say that and kind of mean it, right? Because you've actually done it. And now you don't have the I don't have experience problem, because you've done the full end-to-end engagement, which is amazing. Now, you're not done yet, because remember step 5, we found a second name, and that is obviously a compromised account, and I didn't investigate it on purpose. So what I want you guys to do now is go find Priya's story. So same 3 moves: timeline, baseline, persistence. Find out exactly when she was compromised, what the attacker touched, and whether they left anything behind. And then 2 more: list every account the spray targeted but failed to breach, and because those people need forced resets as well, right? And then write the query yourself. And then what you can do is write a detection rule that would have caught this attack on night 1 before anyone even breached. And in 2 sentences, explain why Omar's Dubai sign-ins were a false positive and what evidence proves it. If you do all of it before you look at anything, attempt every single piece first, because the repetitions are going to be the skill that you're going to develop over time rather than if you just do this once. So I want you to do this as many times as possible until you understand this from end to end. So watch this video over again if you don't understand it the first time. The answers are in the pack as well, so you can check it after. Remember not to copy, but do this yourself and you can check. Everything's in the pack, right? You have the logs, you have the query pack, the report template, the completed example, and yeah, if you just head over to the link in the description, you can download all that and get started with the project if you just watched the first time. But yeah, this is going to be super important for you guys. And before I let you go, a bit of career advice. I've been doing this for 4 years, right? And I've helped multiple people kind of get into their first role. So what I've seen is the people who break in are not the ones who know the most. They're the ones who kind of finish the whole projects and they can talk about it properly, right? Even if you've done this project, I want you to be able to communicate it to different people. So I want you guys to practice that, because knowledge that kind of lives in your head loses its worth, right? You need to be able to evidence it, showcase it, and explain to people your skills. So that's going to be the most important thing, and you can do that by practicing with other people. Another way is to kind of showcase your skills is on LinkedIn. You can put it on your GitHub portfolio as well in a bit more depth by creating a README file. And finally, obviously, on your CV, on your resume, that's going to be the most important thing. So make sure you do that, because you need to be able to document your work. And one thing is, if today was your first investigation, genuinely well done. I know it might be a lot to take in, but it does not get more real than what you just did. The 3 a.m. alert, the impossible kind of travel, the password spray, the MFA backdoor, the invoice fraud rule, the second victim. This is not just a made-up scenario, right? This is what happens on a day-to-day basis in different SOCs, in different monitoring different companies. But yeah, amazing. If you did do this project, make sure you do go end to end. Try it a few times, even if you kind of get stuck on certain steps. But yeah, you can send me your report as well once you've completed it. Just put it in the community. The community is in the first link in the description. Send it over and I'll take a look at your report and I'll give you some advice on what you can improve. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next project. Thank you guys, and I'll see you soon.